Hello, everybody. Once again, I am Lehman Craftsman Jr., aka Zorval Shan Less Than Guru. And over here, you might see some ears pop up, is Mars, the video cat. And today is Torg Tuesday, so I want to talk a little bit about Torg. But what I'll talk about specifically can probably be used in any role playing game. So anything from Dungeons and Dragons to Palladium, old school, new school, um, what have you, it should be able to be broadly applied to everything. And it actually comes from one of the forums that is not an official Torg forum, but there used to be Ulysses Spiele had a official forum, and they shuttered that, and a lot of the people that were on that forum moved over to the uh, Piazza, Piazza, maybe Piazza forum. And basically, there is a sub forum there specifically for Torg for everything old Torg, new Torg, Torg Eternity, original Torg. And although most people go there to learn and ask about rule clarifications and stuff with Torg Eternity. And one of the questions brought up was a specific game that I wrote for. So why not talk about that on for Torg Tuesdays? So basically, a person had a question about this game, Blood on the Blasted Lands, that I am one of the three writers of this, the other two being Brian Reeves and John Watson. I think we did a pretty awesome job, and I'm not just saying that because I'm part of it, but I think that this is a pretty good, solid adventure that gives Storm Knights a lot of choices without necessarily being a complete sandbox. And when I describe sandboxes, and I've heard different people have different views on it, it seems like video game designers have maybe a different view of sandbox than maybe tabletop designers or role players. But when I say sandbox, I mean it's just an open world where players can go do whatever they want, and the game master kind of maybe populates everything. And when the players get there, the game master might have notes, or the game master might ask at the end of the session, "Hey, what do you think you want to do next session? Where do you plan on going?" And then they hope that from that session to the next one, what they plan is what the uh, players will actually do. But that's my definition of tabletop role playing game sandbox, being that the world is open and you are not in any linear fashion doing anything. The group can just go here, they can go here, they can move here, they can decide to turn around or whatnot. Then there are things like these, which are linear stories, and some are more linear than others. Basically, it is like a Pathfinder, the adventure paths, where you have a start, and those they're usually like six full adventures that you move, and you go from a beginning into an end. So there's a plot that you kind of go along, and it might not be railroady. Um, my personal definition when I ever hear railroad is you have to make it from point A to point B as the book or the game master wants you to. You cannot deviate from that point. If you go or try to go somewhere else, the game master will try to force you back to a place that you might not want to go. Now, that is different than linear. Linear is you start at point A, you might need to get to point C or B, sorry, and how you choose to go there is your character's agency. That's how I see character agency is. The game master makes the world, the player decides what their character does in that world. And even if there is a plot, and even if the player knows, or either is subconsciously biased or flat out they know, I want to get to point B because that advances this plot that I want to deal with, and that's why I'm playing this game, then I need to go from A to B, but they can choose how to go there. And depending on the adventure, there are some that you have to go this way. That is more railroad. When we wrote this Blood on the Blasted Lands, we specifically were trying to give multiple ways of going from point A to point B, and then again from point B to point C, from C to D, etc. And even within certain acts, there were here's three different things that you need to do. You choose what order you need to do them. So that gives a little more player agency. Players decide how they want to do things, and in what order they might want to do things, even though the overall plot arc is going to be a story arc. And that's a lot different than railroading, which would be you have to go this way. And it is a lot different than sandbox, which is not necessarily a plot arc at all. The plot is what are the characters doing. The characters are the ones driving the plot, not some big meta plot, mega plot, or small little plots going on. It's kind of like a setting. They go there. There might be a little thing with it because they chose to go there at this time, and over here is a village that's being attacked by orcs over here. Okay, now there's a small plot, but it might not connect to the whole world. It might connect to the whole world, but it's not something that the player characters necessarily have to do. They choose to do it, and then if they want to back away and go way over here, they don't have to necessarily finish. And in here, you don't necessarily have to finish either. And basically, why I'm bringing this up is somebody asked, and these are legitimate questions. I'm not saying that, oh, you said something negative about the game that I wrote, so I'm going to be all, upset about it. No, there's legitimate things, and I might even uh, broaden that talk a little bit. But basically, the question was asked: you have a priority, and here you're set up to have a primary target or primary thing that you need to do, and then this other thing is secondary. So you get the primary thing possibly first. Why would you go to do the secondary thing? And the thing is maybe you don't. Maybe your group decides not to. Just because it's in a book doesn't mean that it's needed to do. We try to put specific things in it that we thought a majority of parties, of player gamer groups would go through, but we're not omniscient. We can just assume that maybe they go there or maybe they don't. So there are ways that you might skip material in here. And there are specific ways when you have three choices to get from point A to point B, your players can choose one point unless they backtrack and turn around and try to do something else. Well, then you'll use maybe two or a half and then a full one, but otherwise you use one and the other two aren't used. Now, if you like those ideas of the other two, then maybe you'll put them into something you create later on, and that's always fine. Mine things for details, beg, steal, borrow from other games, whatever, to make cool adventures. So in here, that kind of thing of they get their primary objective and they're told this is the main objective. Here's a secondary objective. You don't necessarily have to do it. It'd be nice if you do it, but you don't have to. If they only go for the primary, if they're looking at Tharkold as a brutal world or realm reality of you just do what you need to do, then they can move on. You just skip a scene in it. And there's various things that happen with that. But for the people that decide that they want to tackle that secondary option, and as heroes, you probably feel somewhat obligated to do that. That's the heroic thing to do. Then that information is in here as well. And there was another thing, which is this takes place in Tharkol in Russia, and at the kind of the border between Europe, Russia, and Asia, Russia along the Urals on the Europe side is kind of where the adventure begins. As a Tharkold adventure, there's a prep, kind of pre part of the adventure that takes place in Germany. And they were questioning, why do I have a plane flight from Germany over here? And then one of the choices that players might have is another plane flight Why can't I just start in this? And the thing is in this reality, in Torg Eternity, Tharkold, that section is Russia, and Russia is bigger than Tharkold. And the president of Russia, who's one of the dukes duking it out to try to control Russia, does not allow the Delphi Council to have official headquarters in Russia. So there is not a truly official Delphi Council staging area in Russia. So that was one of the things, was that you started off in Germany and then you met a contact in Russia, and you might make contacts, and there might be some safe houses around in Russia, but it is not something where the Delphi Council has a lot of control over. And that was the reason that we did that. If that would not have been the case, then sure, we would have had a right in that city, we would have had the briefing start there. So there's certain things like that that are taking account. Another person asked much later in the adventure, is this NPC seems to have a big, massive force of people and is able to basically at a point, they the NPC offers kindly, actually, it's not necessarily a show of force to begin with, but a kindly, we made an agreement. You did your part of it. If you give me the results of your part of it, I will give you mine. And the players might choose to not do that, and that's fine. That's not something that they must do. It's something that they can do, and depending on their choice, it could have ramifications either way. But there is a big, powerful force behind this NPC. And then later, depending on what might have happened at that point, that NPC might come back. And that NPC then does not have the force. And it was questioned, how can somebody go from here and then over here if they don't have all this power? And it's the way that Tharkold is set up. That person had those forces in this area, and those forces are needed in that area. That person leaves, those forces have to stay in that area, and the area that they go to doesn't have those forces. So that's why things happen. So there are some things that might not seem at first logical, but we did put a lot of thought into why things might change over time. And it's just, this is one of those that we really try to give the players multiple options. Now, we can't think of everything, so your players might come up with a way of doing things that we did not think of. And there are some times, one of them was brought up by the same person, a question, an NPC. There's this NPC here, and you're supposed to get something from this NPC, and it's basically just a stat block. But my players didn't want to fight him, so why is there a stat block? Like, well, somebody else's players might want to fight, and we didn't say that this was the way to talk to this NPC, because we wanted to leave that up to each individual group. From the way I read and from what they had said that their characters had done, and when the first act of this Blood on the Blasted Lands was streamed live, with Ulysses Spiel, with Greg Gordon, the with the creator of Torg, and the main lead line developer of Torg Eternity now, brought people through the first act of this, and they made a deal with this NPC that was pretty cool. It wasn't in the book. We didn't do that. When I ran it, and you can watch it on Roll Hit Die, roll, comma, hit, without a space, comma, then a space, then die. You can watch that on YouTube here, and you can see that when my group did this, they also made a deal, but they did it in a very different way. And the person who asked the question, they did a different deal, similar but different, for their group. And that's great. That means that there are 3 different groups all came to a let's make a deal, not an attack and kill, but let's make a deal, and did it in different ways. And that's really awesome in my view that this adventure allows that. There's not a thing that says this is the only thing that the person wants and you don't know it, or you're told it and it might not make sense for you, or you might not want to do the deal. So there's that flexibility. I was talking with one of the other writers just the other day, and he brought it up, a really good point, and it's something that Stephen King actually wrote in his book on writing, which is writers have kind of a toolbox, if you want to say, a toolkit. And there are certain things that you have in this, and it's kind of like this adventure we give to you as a game master is kind of a toolbox, a toolkit, and it has tools to get you through this adventure. And you might not need all the tools in a toolbox. You might decide that you don't need this tool, but it's still in the toolbox for those who do need it. And there's also things, tools that might not be in here that you want to bring in. And that would be like saying if I have a standard toolbox that has a screwdriver in it, screwdriver will work. It's in the standard toolbox. But I decide I want an electric screwdriver. It's not in the toolbox, but I buy an electric screwdriver and now I can do that. Now I have my normal screwdrivers. I can screw that screw. I have an electrical screwdriver. I can do it. It's just, battery or cord. You probably a battery nowadays. Powered. It's electric. It's faster. It gets the job done. But so does the original. So this consider adventures like this for that we're doing in Torg as a toolbox. It has the tools that you need, but you as the game master determine which tools you'll use in certain situations, which type of uh, scenes you might skip. Um, my group used a close call card to completely skip a scene. That's fine. They decided that they didn't want to fight a certain fight, used the card, and passed it. And that game master was like, there at the beginning, like I said, there's these three choices. Three choices, and they used a choice and had something that got past that scene without the bad stuff happening. And they sounded like they were a little frustrated by that. And I'm like, wow, they had the foresight to get this thing or remember that they had this thing. And to me, that's fine. Let them get past it. You don't have to hit them hard, hard, hard. That is a perfectly legitimate thing. Let them skip that scene. Go on. There's nothing saying that you have to hit every encounter, every scene, every single act. I brought it up before in the God box. It was either 4 or 5, Act 4 or Act 5. I completely didn't use. I liked that act, and I will say that that act is a cool act, but I didn't feel that it was necessary in the game, and it was just going to add time. So I removed that act, and it was not needed for any reason. It's something that I might throw in or use it by itself. So that's a tool that was in the toolbox that I decided I didn't need, but I have that tool now for later to use. So when you're looking through Torg, especially, or even other games, there are games, we go old school, and this is where I'm going to kind of broaden my thing. You go to old school and look at their modules and things like that. A lot of time it's just a setting or a dungeon, and there's no really rhyme or reason, and you have monsters in rooms, and it's the whole thing of why are these monsters in these rooms next to each other and not doing stuff? And it's because basically the setting was given to a game master, and the idea was that the game master would come up with the reasons. And a lot of people didn't like that. They wanted those reasons. So now there's kind of a shift to here's all the reasons, and everything is specifically put in this place, and you're even told, like, this person will act this way for the first 3 rounds, and then they'll start using this spell or this ability on the 5th round, and they're doing stuff like that. And there's a little bit in certain Torg adventures like that, but it's not as much as I've seen it in other games. And I, as a writer, try to stay away from that because sometimes the party's not going to get to that fourth round to see that cool thing. And if it's desperation, I don't want game masters to think that they have to sit there and count round one, round two, three, round four. Okay, now I do it. That they can throw it in when they want to. And that's another thing. Change what you need to change to fix or to fit your players. There are certain things that when I took the group that I'm streaming with now through this, little tweaks that I did on some of them were spur of the moment, and some of them were a little planned ahead. A certain couple of names uh, didn't sit with me very well, just because I missed when I was reading it. Certain male female names were used for the opposite, and in Russia it's not like the United States where boys and girls have names and they can swap. It is very definitive more, and I wanted to bring that Russian feel in when I did it. Now if other people do it their way, that's fine. I'm not going to say you're wrong. It's just I wanted to bring in that. Also, I've been to some of the places personally in here, spent months in some of these actual locations, so I was trying to bring out some flavor, use some Russian that I know, and stuff like that that other people might want not either want to do or just not have that knowledge to do. But I didn't want to write this in Russian. There's some Russian words in here, and stuff like that to give it that feel that it is not in the United States. But I didn't want to overwhelm any game master. So you can look at that knowledge, you can bring it up. And in the back of here, um, both John Watson and I came up with a couple of the locations and gave more in-depth information about those locations. So if you wanted to spend more time as a game master in those locations, or if you wanted to come back and visit it, you would have some of that knowledge. It's not needed though. It's just an extra tool that we put in the toolbox of this mega adventure. So basically, that's kind of what I wanted to say for Torg Tuesday. Was there were legitimate questions. It's just that different game systems handle their adventures differently, and with the Torg, it's not necessarily here's this very linear, um, or with Blood on the Blasted Lands, it's not this very linear thing that you have to hit all the steps here, and hit everything all the way from the beginning to the end. There is points in here where a party might legitimately think we are done. We got what we're supposed to, and they leave. That's fine. You can either let them leave and hear about repercussions later because they weren't curious or whatever, or when they go back, you can have the higher up people in the Delphi Council say, "Hey, thank you very much for your information. Now we've analyzed this and we're going to send you back because we think that this is important." So you can do it that way as well. It's just we wanted to give lots of choices to a linear path, if that makes sense. You're going to go from Act 1 to Act 7. There might be an act or two that logically you couldn't not go on. One of the things I did, and I didn't catch it before, and I don't think it's always necessary, but there is a way to perhaps not do Act 2, depending on if your game master logic dictates this NPC should know this information. This information should not have just been knocked out. When I was running it, I'm like, huh, that's interesting. So on the fly, I changed a little thing, but that's not needed. If you don't want to do Act 2, you don't have to do Act 2. If you don't want to do the 2 acts that I did, cut them out. Give the information at the end of Act 4. Don't even worry about Act 5 and 6, and hit Act 7. It's fine. I'm not gonna be hurt. You can use that for a later adventure. It can be self-contained, and there's a lot of that. Fires of Ra is one that I felt Acts 1 and 2 were really good. They fit together. The other ones fit that same plot line, but there was a cut. So I just had my party do acts 1 and 2. Sometime later, I might get to the rest of the acts. Probably not with those characters because of what happened to them later, and we're kind of retiring those characters. But the information they got in my world is there, and their characters as retired characters might tell their new character to continue on with it. So there's stuff like that. So there are acts that you can cut. It doesn't mean that it's better to cut, in my opinion. I really like the 2 acts that I wrote if they make sense in it. But if you don't want to do that, if it doesn't make sense to you, there's I'm not going to come to your house and say you don't, hey, you got to do it the way that we wrote it. No, no, no. I don't even do it the way I wrote it. If I put another group through this, I would do it differently than the group I'm doing it with now. A lot of times it depends who your players are. If I was playing this with my home crew, they've been gaming with me for decades. The game that I'm doing now, stream, are people that I've only met recently through to organized play. I play differently. I game master differently depending on who it is, what relationship we have to each other, and stuff like that. So there's all types of outside and inside forces, for lack of a better word, in my head right now, that can make things different depending on how fast, how slow, or you on a schedule, how much time do you have? Are you going to get through a whole act in an evening? Are you going to split up an act in 2 nights? That's how we've been doing it when I'm going on. It seems like we get about an act done every 2 sessions. So something we talked about in our session 0, I was like, I cannot do a full act on these mega adventures in 1 session in 3 hours, and I got to work early in the next morning, so I can't do more than 3 hours, and everybody's fine with it. So things like that occur. So I just wanted to say, Torg Tuesdays, that on these mega adventures, view this as a toolkit. Don't view it as a novel that you have to read everything and everybody has to go through everything. Use the parts that you like, discard the parts that you don't like. Change details if you have been to the place and you have a different experience there than I did, and you don't agree with what I've said, or in your world Russia is different, or Darkhold's in a different place, but you still want to use this. It's all good. Just I'm giving you permission as one of the 3 authors of this book to use it as you wish as a game master. But if you have any questions or anything, you can write your comments down below. I do every once in a while go to the Piazza Torg forums and read there. I'm in the Torg Ulysses Spiel Discord. I'm also in the Organized Play Discord as well as the Facebook group. So if you want to hit me in any of those ways, ask me questions about anything in here, I will be happy to tell you, the reasons why I did it and give you permission to change it or mash it up, do whatever you want with it. So once again, I am Lehman Crafton Jr., aka Zorval Chan. This is Mars the Video Cat, and I'll catch you